Hello, hello. This is the My Artifact episode number 4139 probably. Today's date is 5th of July 2026. It's been almost like a morning at 8:35 a.m. Alright, so should we jump into the question? Alright, let's go. You kind of like a see little bit of blank frame, like there is a stand over here. It always be stand, like I put the clothes over there. That stand kind of like a went downstairs because of the rain and things and that. The frame is a kind of like look little bit of blank, but it minimalistic. It kind of like a look really good. Like if I just put right here, okay, if I just be like no, if I just be right here, okay. So this is really good. Okay, the half of the frame, sorry. Okay, yeah, this is good. The half of the frame is a kind of like a concrete. Half of the frame is a kind of like really good. I love this frame. It's like split frame. Okay, with reality component. It is really good. And as also my kind of like assembly body posture is like there, not there, there. Okay, so this is also really good. So it felt like that key. In a kind of like a filmmaking point of perspective, okay, composition is a kind of like a much more essential. Okay, so composition is a kind of like a set to something that key, it looks really beautiful but it kind of like a look really elegant too. Okay, so yeah. So basically the frame is a kind of like a split half, like this concrete and this kind of like assembly open, and my body structure is a kind of like inclined, like my face toward that way, but my body towards that way, but face inclined that way. So it kind of like a feel like a conversation kind of like that. Sometimes it's very essential, by the way, if you are a filmmaker, then the composition is a kind of like somewhat something really essential, because it's a creativity. Okay, yeah, how you set your frame is a creativity. Okay, and it's really good. Whatever, let's just jump to the question. All right. Question is, what feature will I cut if money was not available or money is cut out or run out? Okay, first of all, what exactly is this question and why am I asking this question to myself? I wanted to build application called My Artifact. What exactly is this application? When you write the diary every single time, you cannot able to be write the diary the way that you wanted to. The reason is that your thought process is actually much more faster than your writing speed. Your writing speed is actually slow, is because of you need a pen, you need a paper, you need convenience, and even after that you need to put a lot of amount of effort to write the diary. Because of it takes so much amount of effort to write the diary, there are so less amount of people who are kind of like writing a diary nowadays, almost negligible at all. But what if instead of writing a diary, what if we could record a diary, like a audio record a diary? The stuff that you are kind of like listening or seeing right now, this is my audio diary. I called it like a My Artifact episode. My Artifact episode number 4138. I am doing this thing for past 11 years. I am doing this thing every single day. Because of writing a diary is a self-reflection process, so as recording a diary, so as recording artifact is a self-reflection process. It add so much amount of value in myself. The person that I am became today, the person that I will become tomorrow, it is all because of artifact. The amount of value it add inside of me, I wanted to share this value to the people. How do I supposed to do that? By building an application. My application is somewhat something like a YouTube platform. In a YouTube, you actually upload your video, other people kind of like sees your video. Same thing, you record your artifact, upload your artifact on artifact platform. Other people kind of like listen your artifact. By the way, my artifact is an audio based platform. There is no video based platform. The only one thing catch is that your privacy is always kept hidden. Like basically, my real name is Saurabh Othre, but my artifact handle name would be Prozac 1943 or something else. Before I wanted to build this application, I wanted to aware of all the possible consequences, specifically worst possible consequences. I went to ChatGPT. I tell my idea. tell him that he suggests me kind of like hundreds of possible consequences question, uh, so that I would gonna ask to myself. ChatGPT kind of like suggest me those hundreds of question. This is one of those question. By the way, question actually in the mobile phone, but while recording I cannot do anything at all. So that's why I wrote the question here. Here's the question. By the way, the book that I'm reading right now, I will not gonna talk about that, because if I started talking about this thing, I just can't stop talking about this thing. Whatever. All right. Yeah. So question is that ki, what feature what feature will cut if the money run out? That's a really good question. Like basically is this thing at the beginning, I might not have that much amount of money to run this application, and because of I don't really have any kind of like some money, the it's a kind of like a very like basically is this thing now, almost like a 90% of the business are kind of like a something like a shutdown or stop, or kind of like a something that key does not work out at the beginning 5 year. Like basically there are so many startups are kind of like established by the way, but they cannot able to be survive more than 5 year. Why? Because business is a very difficult thing to do. Yeah, literally very difficult to think to. The business is survive only and only because of money. Yeah, that is true by the way. Like even if you are kind of like putting so much amount of effort, or you are kind of like providing so much amount of value and things and that doesn't really make sense at all. It matter only one thing: money. If you have money, your application, your business will kind of like a grow. If you don't, like example is this thing, let's just say a kind of like a meditation app. Okay, there are so many meditation app and things and that. Okay, but still they are kind of like a providing really good amount of value to the people, right? But still they are not kind of like they are also struggling for money too. They are also struggling for kind of like assembly the users and things and that. There is a lot of things, because let me tell you one thing now. Like basically is this thing, um what I'm trying, we are kind of like moving towards the attention economy. Okay, like attention economy means like that key kind of like who grabs the attention more, earn more money, right? But the problem is that now attention is a kind of like a for a very short period of time. Okay, like basically a trending song or kind of like a things or whatever it is, it capture the kind of like a somebody influence very quickly and very rapidly and very in large number, but it end very quickly too. And that's a kind of like a things that key, if you're chasing attention, you get attention but very long, very short period of time, and that attention will kind of like a gone after some certain period of time. So basically that's the kind of like a things that na ki I have to make sure that I would not kind of like a follow the attention. Okay, because if I follow the attention, then probably I might get lot of user, but I will lose that user very quickly too. Okay, like basically how okay how you kind of like assembly. Okay, like if you're not really understanding the context, let me kind of like tell you. I build the application. I say this is my application, this is my artifact, and I say that if you are kind of like a recording artifact, I will kind of like pay you this much amount of money or this much amount of money, or you might get coupon code or voucher or whatever it is. Okay. Now basically that is a kind of like a somebody that key lowering people to record artifact, or kind of like a maintaining user in your platform, or kind of like a like basically like fighting for user to kind of like a stay on your platform. Okay, if you are doing this thing, then people might gonna came to your platform, but for very less amount of time. There are okay, I am kind of like a seeing lot of kind of like application kind of like do those things. Phone pay is a really good example. Phone pay is a kind of like a things that key like a it has that it has like a there are kind of like offering lot of coupon or lot of kind of like a voucher and things and that. Any UPI kind of like application are kind of like a following that. Credit card application, they are also following that key, we will kind of like provide this much kind of like a that, this much kind of like a that. Okay, yeah. Basically is this thing na ki if you are providing value in money to the user, then people only seek for money. People will only download your application just for money, so that they will kind of like get the money for that and that. and then after that, when they earn money, they will not gonna use their application because they don't really care at all. That's the kind of like a thing that if you are kind of like a focusing on money, you are kind of like a somebody exhausted very quickly, and you will not gonna kind of like a sustain user for longer period of time. Instead of that, give them such a value that matter to them, and you are the unique that no one kind of like a giving it that. Example, let's just say YouTube is a kind of like a somebody offering such a value that user kind of like a watch the video for free. Any video on the YouTube you can watch for a free. Okay, instead of that, YouTube kind of like a simply showing the advertisement and things and that. But basically this is a kind of like a very essential that key. YouTube is a kind of like a providing such a value that no one providing that. And as also there are so many platforms right now, but YouTube started way early, and that's why it's kind of like a have a kind of like a advantage of that key, because of it started so early. So basically it is that key they kind of like a build the reputation and things and that. You might not found any kind of like a some application which kind of like a some YouTube does, but there are so many applications like Netflix does. Okay, like a Netflix, they are kind of like a somebody making sure that it's kind of like a watch the movies on your phone and things like that. There are so many applications like Amazon, Hotstar. Then there are so many applications in India. Amazon Hotstar. In US they have a kind of like a Hulu. Then another kind of like there are multiple kind of like things. But yeah, what I'm saying is that Naki, like basically when your idea is a unique, then try to kind of like a somebody is this thing that value, give them value that, not kind of like instead of money. Okay, so that is a kind of like a things, that is a kind of like a philosophy, and that kind of like a some application will kind of like work well, or user will kind of like came into that application for kind of like not for just getting money, for getting entertainment, because people wanted to entertain. Okay, now TikTok is a kind of like a really good example. In India TikTok is banned, by the way. We cannot able to access the TikTok. Okay, but when it was how like basically is this thing till 2020, it has a kind of like a TikTok, and TikTok is a kind of like a really good kind of like a things. They are kind of like a focusing on entertainment, just pure form of entertainment, and very simplicity point of perspective. You just open the app and that's it. You don't have to choose anything. That's it. The video play, you just watch it. If you don't, skip it. It's a kind of like a really cool thing. Okay, but still TikTok is a kind of like basically is this thing, the TikTok recommendation feature is a kind of like a somewhat something that he not right, probably. I don't know, but we are not going to talk about that. Okay, so basically what I kind of like understand from this context, okay, I understand that key, if I wanted to provide if I wanted to build the application, if I wanted to run a business, and if I'm kind of like providing something value to the user, what kind of like a value do I supposed to be provide to the user, and as well as it should supposed to be unique, and it should supposed to be kind of like something without money and things and that and that. And artifact is a kind of like that. Artifact is a kind of like things that the user will kind of like user will kind of like record the artifact, and they will kind of like feel really good, but still it's not the thing. Okay, yeah, what do you mean by that? Like basically it's this thing that key, right now I'm recording artifact. I am been recording for almost like 11 years, and I know that how much it add a value inside of me. Okay, users behavior are very much different. Okay, user want value quickly. They don't wait, they don't want to wait. Okay, and basically if they are kind of like a waiting for getting the value, then they will kind of like they will not gonna wait, they will kind of like move on, or kind of like things and that and that. And that's the kind of like things, that's the kind of like things that I am kind of like focusing on. I am not gonna provide the value to the user quickly. No, nothing really at all. Okay, artifact is a kind of like a platform where you could listen other people artifact. Okay, that artifact is raw, unfiltered, not heavy edited, nothing really at all. Okay, so in the reel you might kind of like get instant gratification, but in watch listening artifact you might not get that instant gratification. You have to wait, let that other particular person speak, and you have to be listen and that and that. Also you have to be listen such a shit that particular person talks to, because when the people who actually talk, they are talking about shit, this, that. Okay, so there are so many things. So my application is not instant gratification. So because of my application is not a kind of like a providing instant gratification, most of the people will kind of like a will not gonna stay in my application. But dude, that is wrong, right? Like basically, if the people who are not getting the instant gratification, people will kind of like a leave. You will not gonna earn money, right? Well, that is true. But the people who are stay in my application, those are the prime people, and the people who leave, they will come back. They will also come back. Why? Because I am providing such a value that is unique and no one actually providing that. Okay, so they might gonna skip at maybe first second, they might gonna uninstall my application, but next time they realize that I wanted to listen to what is actually people thought process and things and that, so they might gonna come back again and they will kind of like a listen. At the beginning, user just listen the artifact, they will not gonna record the artifact. Why? Because of that key recording artifact required effort. Okay, required effort. Like not so many people who are kind of like a recording YouTube video. Why? Because kind of like a YouTube video kind of like making is kind of like a bit more difficult. But so many people are kind of like a watch so many YouTube videos. Okay, so that same logic, people will kind of like a suddenly came into my application to listen more artifact. They are kind of like a listening artifact and things like that and that. Now because of their kind of like a listening, then slowly transformation happened to recording. Okay, like they realize that they are kind of like getting something value from listening artifact. Then they realize that I can able to be talk, application actually provided the privacy, so I could able to be talk, so people are kind of like a recording artifact. So this is kind of like a transformation actually happened, but transformation happened very slow. Okay, yeah, let's just say a kind of like 100 user came into my application. 100 user came into the application. In that hundreds of user, 50 user gone because of they didn't get the instant gratification, so they will gone. Now I have 50 people, 50 user. In that 50 user, they might gonna listen the artifact someone else. Okay, yeah, and basically that listen to record artifact, this time phase, it takes maybe kind of like a 6 months to 1 year. Okay, yeah, like they 6 months they will kind of like just listen the artifact, they will not gonna record artifact. And after the six months or year, they started recording artifact. In this particular context, the 50 user that I have, they will not gonna kind of like survive for 6 months. Some people will gonna kind of like gone. We just kind of like take it half, like basically 50 out of half means 25 people is actually gone. I have 25 people. That 25 people will kind of like assembly listen the artifact, other people artifact, and in that 25 people, let's just say kind of like 15 people will convert it into the recording artifact, and they are kind of like recording the artifact. Okay, recording artifact. Now, like basically is this thing, who is exactly my user? Okay, yeah, those 100, those 50, or those kind of like a 25. Well, basically is this thing, if you are the user and if you wanted to like acquire the most value from the artifact, you have to be arrive at that stage. You have to be record the artifact, because when you record the artifact, you get the value. You will not gonna get the value when you listen the artifact. You will get the value, but very less as compared to. But when you record the artifact, you kind of like get so much amount of value. Obviously, when you record the artifact, it is a very like a awkward process. Okay, at the beginning it was very awkward. Talking to yourself is a very awkward process. But if you are kind of like continuing this thing now, you will kind of like getting so much amount of value, literally so much amount of value. So this phase is kind of like a bit more awkward. Okay, so what I'm trying to tell you, I am not kind of like a providing instant gratification. I am not providing kind of like a somebody this thing that key kind of like a somebody that key you will kind of like a get it and you will kind of like a get everything. No, you will user kind of like a get the value slowly. Depends on user. If the user wanted to do this thing, they will kind of like do it. They will kind of like do it. That authenticity and that kind of like a value, that structure that I created, which is a kind of like something unique. Okay, yeah, because those 15 people who are kind of like a recording artifact, they are kind of like a simply mouth publicity towards the people. They will gonna say, dude, like a record the artifact, like basically it adds so much amount of value and things and that they will gonna do this by themselves. Why? Because of that, now the user, like basically any random people who kind of like watch any kind of like a good movie, they kind of like recommend to the people. Same thing, artifact is a kind of like adding value, and when they're kind of like add value, they will kind of like recommend to the other people that dude, record the artifact and things like it kind of like feel really good. So let me tell you one thing. My progress is actually happened very slow, very slow. At the beginning, I might have a kind of like just very less of user. Okay, yeah. But at one time, it kind of like a exponential will gonna happen. Okay, exponential when it gonna happen? Well, when I will have a kind of like a, let's just say kind of like a 50,000 user, and those 50,000 user people kind of like a recording artifact, and when they're kind of like a recording artifact, they are kind of like adding value. It's a kind of like a double thing, like a basically assessing what I'm trying to tell you. At the beginning, one people record, then two, then four, then kind of like eight, then 32, then yeah, that is kind of like exponential way gonna happen. Okay, yeah. Like at the beginning, it has a kind of like a very less amount of people who are kind of like a recording artifact, but after some sort of time, they are kind of like a recording artifact so much that most of people download the application just to record the artifact, and that is exponential growth, literally exponential growth. Okay, yeah. But still, this is the very long phase. Okay, yeah. I have to be figured out that key regarding about at the early stage, what kind of like a feature do I supposed to be provided so that I would supposed to be sustain myself, because at the beginning I might not get that much growth, I might not get that much amount of money, and also my focus is not giving the instant gratification, nothing really at all. My application is not meant to give you instant gratification, nothing really at all. Okay, yeah. So basically, is this thing for that particular thing? What exactly the feature that you cut down? Okay. So basically, in my application, there is not that many kind of like a feature. Okay. In my application, there is a kind of like a transcript, the kind of like a audio into the text, but I disable that thing because obviously I can't afford to kind of like have that much using the Gemini token to kind of like do this thing. Okay, so it will not gonna there. Okay, the only one of the biggest feature that kind of like cost me so much amount of money is a database. Okay, that key user kind of like a store their artifact, and which is very much essential by the way, because database is kind of like a really essential, and I have to pay that money. Okay, that's the only thing that cost me that much. Rest of the things is nothing really at all, because I didn't really have monetization program. My application is kind of like a much more lighter, nothing really at all, just kind of like a simple minimalistic kind of like a design and things and that. Okay, I am actually thinking a lot of feature regarding about that ki my artifact should supposed to be only listen in headphone, but still at the beginning I will not gonna do this thing. Okay, I will kind of like make the application as much simple. Also, I have this editing feature, but like I was kind of like thinking that I will kind of like apply in the future. What's the editing feature? Editing feature is that ki when the user record the artifact, and after they record the artifact, they kind of like wanted that ki some sort of part should supposed to be removed. Then from that editing process, you could able to be removed. But at the beginning, I might not have that thing, because still is this thing that ki lack of kind of like a things like editing kind of like I will kind of like do it later, not at the beginning. At the beginning, what kind of like a feature that I'm offering? Okay, first feature is that key. Okay, let me kind of like tell you the architecture, how does actually happen. Okay, so basically open up the application, you kind of like see bunch of people who are artifact. Okay, you have to log in through Google, by the way, Google, and then you create your profile, your username, your real name is always kept hidden. All right, so this is kind of like a stuff. Now you kind of like see your kind of like a home page, bunch of people who are kind of like a recording artifact. You click it, you listen it. Okay, you make sure that you have to listen through headphone. Do not listen on kind of like a normal speaker, because it's not really good. You are kind of like a listening someone people thoughts, so it's not really right. I will kind of like add the feature that it's only kind of like a audible in kind of like a headphone, not in a kind of like a something is a speaker. But at the beginning, I will kind of like maintain as a on the speaker, whatever. So on this like whatever, you kind of like listen and kind of like things. Okay, if you wanted to do the comment on that particular things, you only and only comment when you kind of like listen entire artifact. Like basically, let's just say a person who record the artifact kind of like talk about almost like a 50 minute of something. You can comment a person of artifact after 95% of listen, then you kind of like comment. You cannot comment before you listen. No, I wanted to kind of like remove the toxicity. This is a kind of like one thing. Okay, so this kind of like architecture. Okay, now another thing is that okay, I don't really have any DM feature, by the way. Direct message, there is no kind of like a feature, nothing really at all. I was kind of like thinking about that a private comment, but still it's not really right. DM feature is, I don't know, like right now I don't really have any kind of like thoughts that should I supposed to implement or not. I need a kind of like right now I don't really have that thing and I'm not gonna implement that. Another thing is that key recording artifact. How does kind of like a recording will start up? People user kind of like a click the record button, warning screen actually appear. In that warning screen, it's kind of like a say, do not mention your name, things and that, maintain your privacy. Okay, because it's really essential to kind of like maintain your privacy at first. User kind of like a listen and they will kind of like click on understood that they will not gonna mention things and they will kind of like somebody talk about something. In the top section of the screen, bottom section is a kind of like a recording, top section of the screen is a question, the prompt. That prompt is a kind of like a somebody like a basically question is actually appear that key like a kind of like a bunch of self-help question or kind of like a something such a question that kind of like a somebody add value in you and things like that. Like let's just say is this thing that key what do you like, beach or mountain? Okay, yeah, you kind of like give the opinion regarding about that and stuff like that. Okay, to kind of like give the kind of like somebody topic to talk. Okay, and user kind of like start talking. Okay, at the beginning if you are awkward, that is true, but kind of like a give the time, it will kind of like a be kind of like somebody give the kind of like a little bit of kind of a comfortable and then you record the artifact. Okay, you record the artifact for almost like a 10-15 minutes, then you stop the recording. Okay, it's very essential that you have to review or listen your artifact. You cannot publish directly, you have to be review or listen. That is essential. Why it's that I don't want that the user kind of like a may regret the stuff that they are taught, because at the moment we kind of like a mention thing at the spur of the moment. Okay, like basically when we record the artifact, like we are in particular emotion, like let's just say that he like I kind of like a question is that the particular person actually kind of like describe that he how he kind of like a fall first time in love, and because of it's kind of like a very happy moment and things and that user kind of like a very excited to talk, and when they're kind of like talking about this thing they might gonna mention particular people name and things like that, and they might gonna regret that thing. Okay, if they kind of like directly publish that thing, review is a kind of like a very much essential. That's why the editing feature came, like you kind of like wanted to remove the particular section, you can remove this thing, but right now I'm not going to implement that editing feature. So if you are comfortable to kind of like a things, you can, I don't know. Okay, yeah, but this kind of like a review feature is kind of like a very essential to kind of like a listen your own artifact first. Okay, yeah. It not only kind of like a somebody making sure that you will not gonna kind of like a mention your name, it also kind of like a somebody making sure the review system is kind of like a making sure that you will not gonna spread the toxicity. Because of that, let's just say I will gonna talk about the political, or I will gonna talk about the kind of like the religious hate and things and that, and if you are kind of like listening your own voice, then you realize that how wrong you was. Because when we are kind of like a recording artifact, we are kind of like somebody just in that zone, but when we are listening our artifact, we are kind of like somebody try to understand what am I, and we are kind of like judging ourselves, and that is very much essential. Because of that key, it kind of like add a refinement that what should be supposed to be not to say in the next artifact. Okay, so that kind of like a refinement is very essential for review. So you have to review, like most of people kind of like think that that is a bottleneck, why does have a kind of like a review system, let this kind of like upload directly. But if I kind of like let the artifact upload directly, then probably there is a multiple consequences will gonna happen, toxicity will gonna happen, people will gonna talk something that they might not wanted to talk, they might gonna share something that they might gonna regret and things and that. Oh, they might gonna regret and things and that. So there is a lot of things. Okay, so I don't want that. So having a review system is kind of like a very much essential. Okay, yeah, by the way, in the review system you can kind of like listen your artifact by 2x 3x speed. Okay, yeah, so don't worry about that thing. I know that key listening your artifact is kind of like a but more kind of like a things because I haven't even listened my own artifact. Okay, yeah. So basically is this thing that key, yeah, I kind of like made a mistake that key kind of like assembly I haven't listened my own artifact, so I realized that key what's exactly wrong. So I don't want user should supposed to be do the my mistake, kind of like assembly let the user listen their own artifact with their kind of like a feature like a 2x 3x speed, so that you could kind of like listen much more faster and things and that. When you kind of like somebody listen your own artifact, then you can allow to publish, you publish that thing. Also, if you wanted to review later, then you could save into the draft and it will kind of like a save locally. That's it. Okay, yeah. So this is a kind of like a simply feature that I'm offering right now. Okay, and another thing is that key like a profile there, that's it. Like I'm not kind of like offering any kind of like extra feature, nothing really at all. This is the only feature that I'm offering at the beginning. It does not cost that much amount of money. and the most of the money will gonna cost is a database, and basically database kind of like a very much essential. All right. So yeah, right now I don't really have any kind of like a feature to cut down. Okay, a transcription would be a kind of like a things, but I already kind of like a cut down that thing. So yeah. Also is this thing, the database. Yeah, okay, yeah. So I was kind of like thinking that ki wave format, like a wave format should supposed to be like an artifact should supposed to be recorded in wave. But the problem is that now wave format takes so much amount of space. Like basically 10 minutes of recording. Like okay, there is a kind of like a audio recording has a two kind of like a three AA3, AA3 and wave. Wave is a kind of like a very higher quality of audio, and AA3 something kind of like a lower quality of, but not lower quality. It's a kind of like a things that okay, it's fine. Okay, yeah. If I kind of like let the artifact save into the wave format, then kind of like the file size is a kind of like a much more massive. Because the file size is actually much more massive, the database kind of like it takes so much amount of space in database, so that it costs me much more database. So at the beginning I might kind of like a assembly let the kind of like some artifact save in kind of like a mp3 or kind of like a something that ki AAC kind of like a format, so that kind of like a file size should supposed to be low. The file size should supposed to be low, but make sure that na ki audio quality is not going to kind of like a hampered and that. Okay, but I have to figure it out that wave is a kind of like a takes so much amount of space in database, so that might gonna cost me much. So I'm kind of like a thinking about that key. AA3 or MP3 would be kind of like a format would be much more better to kind of like a maintain the kind of like a things. If I will have money and things and that in the future, definitely I will kind of like a switch to wave format. But at the beginning I will kind of like a thinking about MP3 or AA3 something like that. Alright, so this is kind of like a feature that kind of like I will cut down when the kind of like a money run out. This is it. I have to be end here.